Welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not News with Beth and Elizabeth. Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 4.
Episode 4.
Yep.
Wow. That's it? It feels like it should be episode 104.
I hear you. I feel like we have been doing this for a really long time. And when I say episode 4, it hits me how we are still just babies in this podcast world.
Yeah, that's true. We're like newbies. We are like little newborn babies, and we are definitely just learning how to do things and trying new things all the time and crying when it doesn't work.
There is still a lot of crying in my office every week. About 75% of it's me, and then 25% is my kids when they're hungry.
So you think we still have things to learn, Beth?
Yes, absolutely. We're still struggling through.
Well, we're going to be trying something new today.
Yeah, this is actually really exciting. We are going to be interviewing Manny Schewitz from a website called Modern Liberals. And Manny has been fighting the good fight against liberal fake news and has even created a list of websites that he considers fake news and that people should avoid, and a list of sites that he recommends as credible news sources.
I can't believe like a third person is going to get involved in this.
Right.
Sucked into this. How did we get him on our show?
I've honestly been afraid to ask him why he said yes.
Like, so you're like a real person. Why are you here?
But he did. He said yes.
He did. That's super exciting. And we're going to have that interview later on in our show today. So let's get this party started.
Great. Well, do we have anything to apologize for today?
Well, on behalf of America, I think we could apologize to the rest of the world for letting DJT out.
I think that's solid apology needed.
Yeah.
And also, would you guys mind like maybe taking a turn like babysitting him for like, I don't know, say 3.5 years?
NATO is like, no.
I'm wondering if like all of the Washington, D.C. locksmiths are getting prank called like while he's been gone, and like people trying to pay them to go change the locks at the White House.
Those aren't prank calls, Beth.
I know. If they're like,
it's a legitimate request from Kellyanne Conway.
We feel you. Right. We feel you, but we can't do it. Like there's still Secret Service there. And also, if there's a crowdfunding for that, don't get me into it. It's not legit.
They can afford a locksmith fee.
Right. Yes.
Anyway, so today we are focusing on the problem of the explosion of fake news on the left. So we're actually reviewing 2 articles that are not fake that are talking about this problem. The first article that we're going to look at is called Democrats Are Falling for Fake News About Russia: Why Liberal Conspiracy Theories Are Flourishing in the Age of Trump. And this is written by an author named Zach, and it's either Beecham or Beauchamp, depending on...
Or Bucamp, depending on the pronunciation. Yeah. Where his family's from.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it was written on May 19th of this year, and it's from Vox.
Now, just real quick on Vox, we looked them up at our Media Bias Fact Check and everywhere, and actually they aren't listed on Media Bias Fact Check, but Vox is widely regarded as a very good news source. They don't turn out fake news. They're widely respected and a news source that you can trust.
He starts off citing some of the crazy headlines that we've seen, like Bernie Sanders and Sean Hannity are Russian agents. Paul Ryan is a traitor for refusing to investigate Trump's Russia ties. Is that a crazy one, or does that sound more like...
I saw that. Borderline.
Yeah, I saw that, and they're like, yeah, that sounds about right to me. Anyway.
That's what makes liberals click on it.
Yes, well, and that's kind of the thing. So, but specifically, the first thing he wants to talk about before we get into the why, is we're talking about the what. And our flavor du jour right now is Russia. It's all about Russia. And so he has termed what's going on out there with this fake news the Russia sphere. And specifically, this involves 3 people. Louise Mensch, a former right-wing British parliamentarian, and John Schindler, who used to work for the NSA, and a DC area photographer called Claude Taylor.
Okay.
And so let's talk a little bit about Louise Mensch. I have just recently heard about her, like within the past few weeks. She came up once on something that we were reading, and then I was listening to Pod Save America when they were doing a show. I think they were in LA recently.
Yeah.
And they had a Q&A afterwards, and someone asked them, she says, my mom follows Louise Mensch on Twitter, and she's gone down the rabbit hole. And I think John Lovett was like, oh no, this is bad. There's just nothing redeemable about that.
Right.
And so this kind of piqued my curiosity. And so when I saw this in here, I'm like, oh, okay, this is good. We're going to have the opportunity to learn a little bit more about her.
Who is this Mensch? Tell us more about her.
Well, so I Googled her, and this is what it says on Wikipedia, is that she's an Oxford-educated conservative who briefly served as an MP in a district in the Midlands of England. And it was just for like a couple of years.
So she's English. She's a conservative. What the hell is she doing mixed up in liberal fake news in the U.S.?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, Beth. I think that the answer is that is where the money is. She's not stupid. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah. So she is, and I don't know how true this is, right? But when you Google her and you look into this stuff, there was someone who was saying that she said to them that she wanted to send the left so far down the rabbit hole, basically, that they wouldn't know up from down, and that they're going to have a hard time discerning the actual truth about this. She's not like I guess you could say she's a founder of this website called Heat Street. It's a News Corp website, so it's the part of the Rupert Murdoch media empire, but she's the one who pitched it to them. And it is a right-wing / libertarian HuffPo. So it's not, according to them, it's not political per se. It's more of like a culture war kind of a thing.
It sounds like the show that would have come out in the 80s in response to Miami Vice, like the lesser show on the other network.
That's just all over the place. That's perfect. Yes, it's like a lesser HuffPo too, right?
Right. Right.
So, this is one of the websites that Trump cited as a source for the wiretap info, the Obama thing. Yeah. And there were other sources that he cited, and Wikipedia said, if you look at the material that he was talking about, it doesn't really, like, he was saying more than what this website was saying, but still it's part of what he was citing. So that's where he's getting some of that rubbish from.
That and our friend Joe Polak over at Breitbart.
Yeah.
Was also another person he got.
Well, and they were saying on Wikipedia, and I didn't really check it out, but they were saying that Breitbart was sourcing her.
Great.
Yeah. So
it's like a merry-go-round.
Oh, and the thing is that she's not even hiding it. I mean, she's just a right-winger. She's a right-wing media person. And why are you liberals following her?
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense. Well, so here's the thing. The thing is that she got something right.
Okay.
Like back towards the end of the year last year, She reported, it says here, that the FBI had been granted a warrant to watch email traffic between the Trump organization and 2 Russian banks. And she said that before anyone else. And that catapulted her. And so now people think that she's a real journalist and a real legitimate source of information.
Gotcha. But really, she's like a one-hit wonder at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even want to call her that because I just feel like it's so much more sinister, And anyway, so Zach isn't just talking about her. He's also talking about the Palmer report and Bill Palmer, our favorite guy.
We'll talk. He's actually in my article too, so I have some stuff about him too.
Yeah. So to quote Zach, there's a handful of websites like the Palmer Report that seem devoted nearly exclusive to spreading bizarre assertions like the theory that Paul Ryan and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell funneled Russian money to Trump, a story that spread widely among the site's 70,000 Facebook fans. Yeah. When I see the Palmer Report on my newsfeed, I get so mad.
Yeah.
It's just such garbage. Like, I remember when it first started coming up, because it kind of has a different look from some of all these others. And he's such a weird looking guy. His little image and
byline.
Yeah. And so, it kind of catches your eye. And I'm reading it, I'm like, this is garbage, And so I started kind of telling people who are in my sphere, like, hey, you shouldn't be spreading this stuff. It's rubbish. The thing is, though, that it's not just like my Facebook friends. There's U.S. Senator Ed Markey was forced to apologize for spreading a false claim that a New York grand jury was investigating Trump and Russia. His sources, according to The Guardian's John Swain, were Minch and Palmer.
Nice.
Yeah. So we have him. They also cite in here how Keith Olbermann spread some garbage that was perpetrated by that photographer guy that we mentioned earlier. Like
Claude Taylor.
Yes.
His name.
Ed too, Keith. No. Ed too.
So it's not just everyday people falling for this. It's senators, it's news anchors, people who are pretty well informed.
Yeah, and he has a quote in here from a scholar, like a guy who works at Harvard, Larry Tribe, an eminent and famous constitutional law professor at Harvard, shared a Palmer Report story on Twitter and defended his decision to do so in an email to BuzzFeed's Joseph Bernstein. Can you imagine having to defend everything you do on fucking Twitter and Facebook? Oh my God. Anyway. But this is what he says. Listen to this, okay? Some people regard a number of its stories, meaning the Palmer Report, as unreliable, Tribe wrote of Palmer. Yet he defended disseminating its work. When I share any story on Twitter, I do so because a particular story seems to be potentially interesting, not with the implication that I've independently checked its accuracy or that I would vouch for everything it asserts. Isn't that true of everything that you share or you retweet, that you can't independently vouch for all of that?
Yeah, I think though there's a way to do that. If you're sharing something that you don't agree with or you don't think this is real and heard something interesting to look into, maybe put that in, your tweet or at the top of your Facebook that I'm sharing this article because of not because I'm saying this is valid and true.
Well, this is what I'm saying. I'm like, yeah, dude, obviously, right? Because you're not an omniscient being. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sharing anything. You wouldn't be like, oh gosh, I want to share this article from the New York Times that says blah blah blah, but I don't know. I haven't personally checked all those sources and all of the reporting in it. That's it. That's anytime we share anything, we're putting that out there. I would say with the implicit understanding that we have not personally investigated all of this. Like, dude, we have to, even constitutional lawyers at Harvard have to be held to a higher standard.
Well, it's like you and I mean, we're putting things out there, and we're doing as much as we can from our, offices where we cry regularly, and to say, hey, this looks legitimate or this doesn't. Are we personally journalists that go out there and chase down the story and chase down the sources and try to make sure that everything is correct? No, that's why we try to read legitimate news sources. And so when you're sharing something that's not from a legitimate news source, like the Palmer Report, then you're taking that chance that nobody has done that. And you can't legitimately sit down at your computer and kind of source it to show, yep, this is true. A lot of times you can show it's not true, but that's kind of, what we're trying to do too, is to give people, first of all, ways to look at it and to think critically about it. I mean, we can't say with 100% certainty when we put something out there, this is the exact truth, because I personally went out there and verified it.
Well, and why would we want to share it anyway? Right?
Right.
Zach is saying here, liberals fall for lies for the same reasons conservatives do. Partisanship.
Sure.
And I have seen articles from, for example, Being Liberal, Occupy Democrats, that have come through my feed, and I might say, oh, do I want to share this? Like this particular piece by them is legit.
Right.
Okay, there's no fake news contained in here. But I'm not going to, because you put out other stuff that is definitely not legit. And so I think that you get blackballed. How do you feel about that?
I mean, that's a good question. Like, do you completely blackball a site because some of their stuff is propaganda or some of it is, not on the up and up? I mean, it's a good question. Like, I've struggled with that myself, and I don't know that I have the perfect answer.
Well, and let me just bring it back. Like, the reason that I was kind of saying that in terms of what Zach was saying about partisanship is because it fires all those little synapses that I like.
Right.
Makes when I happy. See this stuff, I'm like, oh, yeah. And I like, you want to believe it, and you want to click it, and you want to see what it has to say. And that's not intellectually healthy.
Because every time you read those stories, it's helping you to form your opinion, and also the way that you're going to talk about that topic. So if you're filling your head with too much propaganda about it, it's going to be easier to go over to the dark side.
Back to Louise real quick. I had mentioned that she's part of this trinity of the Russiosphere that Zach has identified. And the NSA analyst guy, Schindler, he was a kind of a conservative talking head for a while. And he reshares her stuff. He cites her. She cites him. And so with her and him and the photographer, it's all them, recycling all of that information. And Schindler said about her, Louise has no counterintelligence background, nor does she speak Russian or understand the Russians at a professional level. And that makes her analysis hit or miss sometimes. That said, very few people pontificating on Kremlin Gate have those qualifications. So if that's disqualifying, pretty much everyone but me is out.
Oh, awesome. So I can only trust him.
Yeah, that's pretty convenient, dude. He had a problem with a dick pic scandal a few years ago. I think I just mentioned that. Yeah, it's not really relevant to our conversation, but
bring it up.
Yeah, I'm just gonna just kind of leave that there for y'all. So, anyway, it is really complicated, and so it's really important to go to reliable sources for your information. So he, though, is legitimizing her. So if people see him as someone who's knowledgeable, she comes through that filter and it gives her some legitimacy.
Right. They're sourcing each other to make each other seem legitimate.
Yeah. It's, Zach refers to it as a self-reinforcing information circle, retweeting and validating one another's work on a nearly daily basis.
I like that. A self-reinforcing information circle.
Yeah. So Louise does not care for Bill Palmer, apparently.
Oh, really?
So he says that he's ripping her off.
Oh, he's not in the circle. He is in the rhombus.
Yeah. And so according to Quantcast, site that measures web traffic, he got around 400,000 visitors last month.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that insane? And he had this story that says CIA now says there's more than one tape of Donald Trump with Russian prostitutes. That story was shared 41,000 times.
Of course it was.
Yeah, well, people, that's salacious. Oh my God. People are going to click that. I might click it knowing that it's absolutely 100% garbage. I might just click it just to see. Well, then Zach goes on to talk about talking to scholars who, focus on how people form political beliefs, false ones in particular. The basic thing that they say that you need to understand is that political misinformation in America comes primarily from partisanship, like we said. People's political identities are formed around membership in one of the two tribes, and that filters how they see the world. Misinformation is much more likely to stick when it conforms to pre-existing beliefs, especially if those are connected to social groups. And we've talked about this before, like if it's religion or politics and you're saying something that is challenging that, you're challenging who they are and how they see the world.
Right.
And they talked about a study that they ran where people were presented with a problem about skin cream. Okay. And so they say, do you think that this skin cream works based on these numbers that I'm presenting to you about efficacy? And people would make a judgment and it would be correct based on the numbers that were presented to them. Now, they changed the basis of that and got rid of the skin cream and presented it gun control.
Oh.
Yeah. And had people identify, where do you fall on the ideological spectrum? And guess what, Beth? How do you think that turned out?
Not the same.
Yeah. And so this is part of why we can't even agree on basic facts about things. If someone is presented with mathematical data, here you go. Based on this data, what do you think their ideology is going to trump it? Well, and then it goes also into how people want to believe that their side is good and the other side is evil. True. And they're willing to believe the basest allegations against their political enemies. I remember hearing an interview on NPR. If that doesn't tell you enough about me, listen to NPR every day. They talked to a man who was attending a Trump inauguration event, and he said how glad he was that Trump was elected, and the Republicans are in charge because the Democrats are evil. He actually said that. And my jaw was just on the ground. We're evil? We are evil. Oh my God.
And then you go into, oh, sure, we're evil because we're the ones that want to take care of poor children and give everybody health care. And then so you start turning around and calling them evil, and
well, I'm thinking in my head, you're so evil. Oh my God, you were at a Trump inauguration event and you're calling us evil? It says here in this article, to quote, "You tend to assume your political enemies have malign motives, which means you assume they're doing something evil behind the scenes." Well, I read that and I thought, no, the GOP does evil stuff in Congress.
It's not behind the scenes.
There's nothing hidden about it. I don't assume them doing anything evil behind the scenes. I don't need to.
I'm talking about all this. So when we were researching for the Comey episode, and I was trying to pull up some fake articles, And it was kind of hard because when you type in like James Comey, Russian conspiracy theory, it pulls up legitimate articles because this is what we're talking about now. And it's happening and it's still being, uncovered. We don't know everything yet. And I think that's another part of it too. That's why people click on these articles.
Oh, you got that 100%. That's what Zach is saying here too. He goes on a little bit later on the article to say that part of the problem is that there is evidence of an actual conspiracy.
Yes, for once, it's true. Yeah. Like there is evidence of this actual conspiracy.
And it's like this big, massive, crazy conspiracy, very complicated. And it's scary. And he says that there's a huge audience of Democratic partisans who want someone to fill in the blanks for them. And that's absolutely true. Like we want certainty from life and we want to know what's going on right now. And you're not getting that from legitimate news sources. As well, you shouldn't be because we don't know. We don't know everything right now. There's tons of smoke. And I'm pretty sure I see a fire over there in the corner.
Or like 7.
Yeah, but I can't tell you what it is. And, they can't either, but they're doing an awesome job. Right. Washington Post, New York Times, amazing, amazing work right now. We just have to be patient and not buy into this garbage because it's just not good for your brain. He says this kind of thing is poisonous. For Republicans, it made their party more vulnerable to actual penetration by hacks, the Michelle Bachmans and the Sean Hannitys. It allows unprincipled liars and the outright deluded to shape policy, which both makes your ideas much worse and discredits the good ones that remain. And he says that luckily for the Democrats, we don't have a pre-built media ecosystem that amplifies this shit like the Republicans did with Fox News. Right. And in the absence of left-wing Limbaughs and Breitbarts, says media outlets totally unconcerned with factual rigor, it's much harder for this stuff to become mainstream.
Nice. So the article I have is by Business Insider, which I never really read before we started this podcast, but Business Insider is like, I kind of like them.
They're pretty legit.
They're pretty legit. Yeah. This is called People Want It to Be True Inside the Growing Influence of a Mysterious Anti-Trump Website. It was published on 5/16/17 by Pamela Engel. Now, I did look up Business Insider on MediaBiasFactCheck.com, and their factual reporting is high. The notes are that the Business Insider is a German-owned American news website that has a left-of-center bias in reporting. It's well-sourced, but it has been criticized for clickbait style. The overview of this article is that basically since the election, there's been a trend that we mostly saw on the right before, a problem of credibility. And now that problem is spreading to the left. Mm-hmm. And they want to hear how he's going to be impeached, just as they wanted to hear how horrible every decision Obama made was. And then this article does a really deep dive into Bill Palmer, the owner-operator of the Daily News Ben and the Palmer Report. You may see that called TPR. And Donald Trump is Not My President is also another one that he runs.
Now, there are 2 Donald Trump is Not My President groups.
I think there's actually 3.
Oh, there probably are, but just be careful because one is written by Manny, our interview today.
Yeah,
not
we're going to talk
but it's operated by modern liberals rather, and the other one is evil.
Yeah. So, Bill Palmer claims to be non-controversial, and many sites and people have discredited his work. So this article also talks about Senator Ed Markey spreading that.
Senator Ed Markey, I think it is.
Yeah, Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts had appeared on CNN and made a startling claim. He said subpoenas have now been issued in Northern Virginia with regard to Flynn and General Flynn's associates. A grand jury has been impaneled up in New York. The part about Virginia was correct, and I did some looking into this. So basically, the Virginia one, they oversee the CIA and the Pentagon because of where they're located. And so that's why you see them doing this grand jury in this case, where the one in New York wasn't true. that's what Bill Palmer had said. And then once the senator said it, Bill Palmer was like, hell yeah, I've been vindicated. I've been saying this for weeks, and now it's been verified that this is true by a senator. So he was super excited about it, but it still wasn't true. So again, we're looking at that information go round where he's saying, I was cited, it's true, and the person who cited it was like, I thought he said, no, oh, he said it. No, he said, yeah.
It's like, yeah, I got it from this site called The Onion.
Yeah. Well, actually, so this is the one where the way that Bill Palmer had cited it was from a tweet by Claude Taylor.
Yes. Yes. So, going back to my article where we talked about that.
Right. And Claude Taylor had tweeted, this just in from source with knowledge of Comey's investigation. 2 grand juries have convened, and I know that one is almost complete. This article goes on to say, for years under President Barack Obama, far-right news sites came under the microscope for pushing misleading, slanted, and often factually inaccurate information. Their popularity and often unchecked spread on social media helped lead to the rise of figures like President Donald Trump. The pervasiveness of so-called fake news was a major reckoning point for Facebook and other outlets and companies after the 2016 election. So they interviewed Brooke Banowski, I think is maybe how you say her name. She's the managing editor at Snopes.
God, she must be exhausted.
I know. But, you know, for her, it's just the same as before. Before, it just was coming from the other side. Now it's coming from this side.
Yeah, and there's like 10 times more of it. It seems like it seems like every time I come across something that seems stupid and I look it up on Snopes, it's there. You know, I can't imagine. You know how much they must process all the time.
Well, she says people want it to be true because they hate Trump. But how does that make anybody any better than the people who hated Obama and would seize on anything to discredit him?
Yeah, like spreading things like he's going to take away all your guns, he's the Antichrist, he's going to find a way to squirm into a 3rd term, which I think we talked about on a previous episode.
Right.
Like, God, I wish that one wasn't fake.
Well, they go into talk again about Louise Mensch and Claude Taylor and Bill Palmer, and they talk about this guy, Ned Price, who was a spokesman for the NSC, and he used to work for the CIA, and he had shared a Palmer article on Twitter. And they asked him about it, and this is what he said, which I love this quote. It's, every once in a blue moon, the tin hat can fit. So Palmer says, like, there's nothing controversial about my reporting. He definitely, jumps to defend himself, and not only against, like people like this author who wrote this article said that he was sending her basically hate mail while she was writing this. Mm-hmm. But he jumped on this lady named Jennifer Russell, who writes a craft blog under the banner Jen's a Little Loopy. And she had written a blog called The Palmer Report is Not a Credible Source of Information. I really like her, first of all. Yeah. Now, it does say in here, so what it says is he headlined a post, Palmer Report inaccurately attacked by a random woman on her knitting blog. Now, he was incorrect in a couple things there. She's not a knitter. She crochets. So the Business Insider report has it correct where they call it a craft blog because that's what she calls it.
Yes. I like her less now that I know that she's not a knitter and she's a crocheter. That's another tribe. Those people are evil.
We were super excited. We were like, a knitting blogger who speaks out against fake news? Does she want to be BFFs? Like, maybe? Like, could we call her? And then we found out she crocheted, and we were like, well, okay, we'll still follow her.
Even though she's evil.
Okay. Yeah. Even though she can make crafts happen with one needle instead of 2.
Yeah, but we are joking, though, just FYI.
Oh, totally.
Like Beth and I are knitters, and yes. I don't know how to crochet, and so it's...
I don't either. It's like, crocheting is like It's like Harry Potter with the magic wand. Like they have one hook and then magically things appear out of it. And I don't get it.
Much. I see that. Yeah, it's just like this wrist movement, and it's like boom,
things come out, and they're like
flower
wherever they want it. I don't get it.
What I especially love about Jen and her story is that it just really shows that this is something that we can all take on.
Absolutely.
Like, no matter what your specialization or your interest, just speak up about it. And then you too will get hate mail from Bill Palmer.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm expecting that we're probably going to get some hate mail from Bill Palmer if he ever hears about this. But he like went off on her. He's gone off on Manny, who we're going to talk to later. He's gone off on the author of this article. I mean, anybody who attacks him, he comes out and says that, like, you're terrible and you're the one that's wrong. It's ironic to me that this guy is such a liberal because he acts like a Republican.
Well, and I don't know. I don't know he's a liberal. I don't know anything about him except that he has a fake news website. He could be like Louise Mensch.
He could be. I don't know.
Conservative and liberal clothing.
Could be.
Trolling us. The whole thing makes me so mad because it just makes me feel like these people think they're these puppet masters.
Right.
And we're just being manipulated by these right-wingers.
So we talked last week about a crowdfunding campaign that we advised people to stay away from. Did you ever see a crowdfunding campaign called $1 million to impeach Donald Trump?
I don't know if I did. Maybe.
I think I even saw this one come through. So that was operated by Bill Palmer.
Mm-hmm.
And the page said that the $1 million would go toward the Palmer Report's editorial budget.
See, if I'd seen that, my brain would have blocked that shit out.
Yeah. He raised almost $27,000 on that.
Oh, God, people. No. He's got to be so fucking rich right now, too,
Maybe. I don't know about him. I don't think he's at the
with all the traffic that he gets, and he doesn't even, like, he writes all this shit himself, allegedly. I mean, if he has people working for him, they're not making a lot of money. I wonder.
They talked about that in this article, actually, on the list of authors that he has on his website. Most of them have only written one article for him. One guy has written 3. And then another guy has written 12, but every other article is by Bill Palmer. Mm-hmm. And they said he's really, he's very focused. Has a great work ethic. Like the day
I'm sure. Yeah.
Comey got fired, he put out 17 posts. I mean, that's a lot. And so he's definitely the one behind the Palmer Report. And the Daily News Ben hasn't been active for a while. If you go there, anything that's posted there is just a copy of a Palmer Report. Mm-hmm. So it looks like he's not actively doing that one right now. But this is his thing. He says, I cannot stress enough times that my biggest detractors are bottom feeders on the left, Palmer wrote in a Facebook post, according to a screenshot provided to Business Insider. The right doesn't even know I exist.
Well, the right doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, because
their problem, are you?
He's just causing problems for us.
Yeah.
But they talked in this article about these articles provide hope for people, and that's why they click on them. And again, back to the Snopes lady, Banowski cautioned against trusting sites like the Palmer Report, saying that while Palmer's stories likely aren't created out of thin air, anybody could claim anything. And readers could think the site adheres to journalistic standards. You're getting all this misinformation from both sides now, including the left, Banowski said. They're supposed to be, according to them, the intellectual side of the political continuum, and they're being made fools of, and that's ultimately going to be a major, major problem. So, we got an issue going on here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and like they said in my article, it's just poison. It's giving you hope maybe in that moment, and it's confirming your bias. That's not what we want for where we are. We don't want to be like the right. We don't want to be the tinfoil hat wearing crazies shouting garbage when there's so much real shit that we shouldn't be distracted.
Right. So, as we like to say, spread jam.
Not lies.
Well, hey, let's get Manny on. Let's take a break and get Manny on the line here.
Okay.
And we'll be back with our interview with Manny in just a moment.
Okay. Okay, welcome back. And we are here with Manny Schewitz of the Modern Liberals website. Hi, Manny.
Hey, everybody. How's it going today?
Good. Thank you so much for coming on the show and being our very first interview. Woohoo! Yay!
Hey!
We are so excited. And I don't know how we managed to get you to come and do this, but hey, thanks for coming and thanks for being here.
Hey, it's always fun doing a show.
Well, cool. Well, why don't we start by you just telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Okay. I'm a dad. We have 3 kids. Work for a living. Live in the middle of the Bible Belt. I grew up as a conservative Republican. Over the years, I became more and more liberal. I'm now a registered Bernie-crat. And I'm also a union member.
Mm-hmm. Well, we talk a lot about defining what is truly, fake news. And we were curious, what does fake news mean to you?
Okay, well, I mean, there's a couple of different levels of, just like with racism, there's different levels of racism, just as there are different levels of fake news. There's the obviously fake news where, and this is not to be in any way confused with satire, because I have started doing more satire recently, and it's very clearly labeled that it's satire. For example, back in the day, the fake news thing was sort of, it was mostly confined to the right, but what they would do is it would be like, arrest for Obama impending any day now, or Hillary's getting ready to go to jail, stuff like that. And then the left had their own version of it, and it was more along the lines of they would take a story from a reputable website, like Reuters or something like that, and then they would take it and put this incredibly hyperbolic spin and slant on it, complete with a headline that was to draw in clicks. So I would say there's fake news, and then there's fake news clickbait. And one of the pioneers of that was Raw Story, where they would take a local, and by the way, Raw Story is not happy with me, but that's another story. What they would do is they would take a local story, and they would, quote unquote, break it. And they would put a really hyperbolic spin on it. Just as an example, let's say there was a shooting here in Lafayette. I don't know, there was a shootout in a parking lot or something like that. And they would spin it so hard and put such a hyperbolic headline on it, it would be like, oh, look at this, red state, racist white man kills black people. And it would be basically like a drug deal gone wrong or a domestic dispute. But they would spin it in that way because they knew they could get clicks off of it. Raw Story was doing that. Addicting Info was one of the copycats of that. And then as from about 2012 on, it just started bubbling, and like these site owners would create their own sites and work together, fight amongst each other, create new sites, and it just kind of bubbled up, especially like leading up to the during the 2016 campaign. It just absolutely mushroomed, and it wasn't just American people getting in on it. It was the BuzzFeed did an article about it, and it was something that I had been witnessing where these sites were putting up stuff. They were originally aiming them at Bernie supporters, putting in all sorts of just complete lies and misinformation about Hillary Clinton. So the Macedonian folks were doing that, and then they were getting there was one group. I wrote about this because I was actually in the group and watched it unfold. There was a group that was called Bernie Sanders Dank Memstash, which was really, really popular. For a while, I had participated in there, And the first viral article off of my new website was posted in there, and we had like almost 130,000 hits in one day. Suddenly, none of our links that we posted in there, or pretty much anything that we posted in there, was being shut off and was not being approved. Well, it comes to find out that the guy who owned the group, he was getting paid, I was like at $90 or $100 a week from various websites to approve their links and nobody else. And these sites were Macedonian, Serbian, etc. And so that's where the 2016 fake news phenomenon popped off from. Now you have copycats all around the world.
Right. I remember seeing a piece, I think it was on 60 Minutes, about the Macedonian kids, basically, I think teenagers, who were over there running these websites.
Right. And what they would do is they were hitting both the left and the right. And they would put up these sites like, USA Flash News, or they were trying to mimic reputable American websites. Google shut some of them down, but there's so many ad networks out there that if they get booted off of one, they would just hop onto another one.
Yeah. And then they have these bots running other accounts, and it makes it really, really tough.
And then on top of it, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and it's tough too when, kind of back to what you were saying about the raw story, when there's that kernel of truth in there, but it just gets blown out of proportion at these things. And so it makes it tough as a reader, if you're looking at something, to discern if it's real or not, or, and there's so much emotional stuff like that shooting, this hypothetical that you brought up, so there's that kernel of truth in there, but then it's been amplified and now you're having an emotional reaction to it. And that's really what it's about.
And that's what they want. They want that visceral reaction. They want that outrage. They want you to click on that story, click on their ads, and then share it with as many people as you can. And there is a lot of money to be made in this. There are people that this is all that they do, and they pull down $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a month or more.
So what made you get so involved in fighting fake news?
I started writing in 2010, late 2010, and I had and I was starting to produce, and at that time I was on my own. I wasn't working with anybody else. And I had started a page, and it grew from 25, 50 family members and all that. And it just slowly grew. And I noticed that there was this guy who kept spamming links to the same stories over and over and over and over again on various news sites. And it was like I couldn't go to a single news story without seeing him post his link there first. And I said, wait a second. So I started digging into this stuff, and I've realized that the guy was basically spamming his website and portraying stuff in, it was putting hyperbolic spins on things. And so I called the guy out on it. Eventually I just got tired of it, so I blocked the guy. We fast forward to 2012. The election's heating up, and I'm writing stuff. And I noticed, I was making some images, some image macros or memes, and I noticed that this same guy was running it on his website, and I think he was crediting it to somebody else. And I said, excuse me, I made that. One thing leads to another, and all of a sudden I've got all these people on my page just bad-mouthing me, and I realized I was on a troll brigade. The person behind that site was one Matthew Desmond Carey, the owner and creator of Addicting Info. One thing led to another. I had people mass reporting my page. I kept getting Facebook timeouts. And ever for the last almost 5 years, I've been the on-again, off-again target of troll brigades, DDoS attacks, doxing attempts, things of that nature. And I said, well, okay, if you're going to try to silence me, if you're going to try to make me shut up. It has the opposite reaction from me because I just fight back. So I said, okay, I'm going to start fact-checking fake news. I'm going to start calling out fake news. I'm going to start calling out plagiarism. I've been doing that now for almost the last 5 years. I mean, the first article I wrote about this issue, I came out swinging. And before we go on to the next question, I was going to say, in my satire writing, I've done a little bit of satire here and there over the years. I just started with a website called The Red Shtick, which is from Baton Rouge, where I've been doing a few articles here and there. And it just so happened that in the past week, an article that I wrote was featured on Snopes, PolitiFact, and on AP News. After Donald Trump had said that Andrew Jackson had seen the war coming and that he could have, he was angry about it.
Right.
I wrote an article saying that Donald Trump praises Colonel Sanders for his service in the Civil War.
That was my favorite.
You saw that one?
So hard. I told Elizabeth about it.
Yeah.
And that's what alerted me to the website Red Shtick, and we were looking into it. And I will say this, one of the things that I really like about your site is that the satire is very clearly marked. Everything is very clearly marked. But I can't say the same for the Red Shtick. And maybe that's some feedback to give them, is that it's not, they don't have it you have to really dig in to figure out that this is a satire site. It's not like just up front. Like,
yeah, I mean,
you have a tag that literally says satire at the beginning of every article, so you know that that's what you're under. And I really like that because there's no question.
Right.
Yeah, there's a bit of a debate, I think, on whether that is something that is really necessary. Like, I think there was some talk about Facebook adding a satire label to articles.
Honestly, I can tell you this. You can label satire with big neon lights, and you can put a giant runway, like you're coming in for landing, and you can mark it satire, 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 and people will still not read the article and or not comprehend satire. Because, like, for example, the Red Shtick is all humor and satire. That's all it is. I mean, the name of it...
Yes, shtick.
Right, shtick. And actually, I just popped the link into a group. It says, disputed by Associated Press, PolitiFact, and one more. I just posted it into my browser. I was like, And then it comes up as...
when I went to their website, I just didn't see anything up front that said, this is a satire site. I mean, if you were looking at that site and you thought, oh, this is real news, you obviously are not functioning at all levels. your story in particular about, Colonel Sanders and stuff, that's obviously not true. It was hilarious.
But that's kind of the thing, though, is that I thought when you shared that with me, that I thought was so funny, is that someone would maybe believe that if they really wanted to,
Right. And honestly, that's the problem.
Yeah.
This bias is that the truth is whatever people want to believe it is. Like, for example, the Red Shtick. It's designed to be specific to Baton Rouge. So there would be Baton Rouge jokes, Louisiana political jokes. Like, for example, I have one coming up about our Attorney General, which you're really going to like. If you didn't live in Louisiana and you didn't know Louisiana politics, if you were a conservative, you would snap this up and share it with all of your friends because, oh my God, they're finally taking Hillary down. And so we kind of, with the Red Shtick, and I've had other articles that I've written before that if you got past the first paragraph, I would put a title on there that was true. Like, for example, I wrote one about a barbecue place in South Carolina denying service to someone because they were black, citing their religious freedom. This was written around the time of the Hobby Lobby decision, and the article went absolutely freaking viral. But if you actually read the article, I would, like 2 paragraphs in, I would say, okay, now for everybody who read past the first couple of paragraphs, this is a historical story from the 1960s. Then, just like Hobby Lobby, this restaurant owner claimed religious freedom by segregating customers in his restaurant even after segregation had been abolished. I guess I could say the way that when I write articles, and sometimes I'll put a slightly clickbaity headline on it, but it will discuss like real issues, and it's sort of like the inside joke where people will react viscerally on the page, and people who've been following me for a long time will be like, "Huh, saw who didn't read the article."
Right.
And it's sort of one of those kind of gotcha things. So it's, I guess you could say maybe it's ironically misleading, but it's intended to be a teaching moment where it's like, okay, if you shared this, if you pass this on as fact, you're a moron. But people still go, oh, headline, something I like, share.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so what I do is my way of fact checking stuff is I will go and look, and if a story sounds too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. And if I see it on some website, if I see a story on some website that I've never heard of before, and I don't see it on Reuters, AP, BBC, local news, Washington Post, New York Times, I'm like, yeah, this is probably baloney.
What do you think about if you have a website? Like I've seen things from like Occupy Democrats, things like that, where they have some things that come out that are decent. Like they're basically just re-reporting something from a legitimate, news site, right? And then there's other stuff that's garbage.
Right.
Do you just throw it out altogether, say it's Occupy Democrats, I'm not even going to bother with them? Yep.
Exactly. What Occupy Democrats does is they do similar things to Raw Stories, where they'll take a local story, regurgitate it, slap a hyperbolic headline on it, and run it on their page. And then their network of pages that work with them. Another thing that they do is they will take legitimate video from MSNBC, CNN, etc., and alter it to where you don't see the CNN or MSNBC trademarks. Occupy Democrats doesn't have a media. They have there are a couple of brothers who hire people to work for them, and they just rip videos off of the stuff like that.
So we have seen that list that you created of fake news sites. And we're curious, what is your criteria for the site to be on that list?
Yeah, I mean, if a site represents itself as a news outlet, and it's not, that's a very good first criteria for it. And I didn't put obvious satire sites on there because obviously I would expect the people that have followed me for a good period of time to know what satire is, what comedy is, and what a blog is versus what news is. So if a site just rips videos from somebody else or plagiarizes paragraphs of content from Democracy Now! Without sourcing them necessarily, then that's a fake news site. Same thing.
I just want to clarify one thing there. So if they did give credit, you would be more okay with that.
Right, it'd be more along the lines of a blog. If somebody comes out and says that we're a blog, okay, great. If you're adding additional and original analysis to a news story, then you're a blog. Like, just for example, my local TV station, they get their news stories from AP. They're paying AP for the content. These sites don't pay AP, Reuters, or whoever for the content. They rip it off, slap their own logos on it, and repackage it as their own stuff.
And then put a salacious headline.
Exactly.
Big takedown.
Yeah, big takedown. Donald Trump to be arrested tomorrow. It's like, oh, come on. They feed into people's confirmation biases. They want so desperately for something to be true that they'll take whatever. Just as on the right, these people would say, well, you can't trust the liberal media. You can't trust the mainstream media, especially over towards the far left, where you start getting over to sort of like this Jill Stein supporters and stuff like that. You get sites like Common Dreams, sometimes Alternet, where the line between the far right and the far left, due to the horseshoe theory, becomes really blurred. So you have a lot of people on the left who've been fed stuff by these fake news sites on the left, or libertarians, or all of these interests who are trying to undermine democracy and or make a profit, where they'll say, well, CNN is fake news. And I'm like, wait, CNN is fake news? Wait. And then they'll be like, oh, I voted for Bernie. I'm like, no, you're saying the same thing as a Trump supporter says. Do you not understand what's going on here? They'll say, oh, well, I don't believe the mainstream media. And then there's this whole cottage market like InfoWars, Palmer Report, Louise Minch, where the lines between the far left and the far right are so blurred that you can't sometimes tell what kind of person you're talking to.
Right. Yeah. So the Palmer Report. So he's one of the people that you're having a bit of a war with at the moment.
I wouldn't call it so much a war as a sort of one-sided skirmish.
Okay.
That's good.
Well, we saw an article on the Palmer Report indicating that he is allegedly or taking legal action against you. Have you heard about that?
I heard that, and the owner of Liberal America, she actually messaged my pages going, oh, this couldn't happen to a better person. And I was like, really? I said, number one, Bill Palmer, as far as we know, is not his real name. This guy operates under a ton of different aliases. If he were to actually sue me, to actually file a lawsuit against me, first of all, he would have to find out my real name. Number two, he would have to be willing to disclose his real name. Number three, he would have to prove that I engaged in any sort of libel or slander. The whole thing was another fake story because there is no lawsuit. There is no legal action of any sort. The only action coming from Palmer Report is periodically when I post something critical of his site, a number of his people from one of his groups will show up and say, oh, fake news, call me a Russian troll, a Russian paid operative. So it's basically like what Trump did. No, you're fake news.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. It's all deflection.
His article, so it's labeled Palmer Report initiates legal action against libelous fake news site Modern Liberals. So that's saying in the headline that he's done it. But then in the article, he says he can't find you, so he can't do it.
Right.
Like basically he says I would have, due to his dubious background and, we can't actually serve him papers. So he says in there
yeah, but this is the best part.
He says he basically leaves the door open that he's going to do it.
Yeah. So did you know that he has a Facebook site called Donald Trump is Not My President?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually a group. A group,
yeah. And you guys also have one with that same name.
Right. I created that group the day after the election. Like many other people, I was sure that Hillary Clinton was going to win.
I'm surprised you could type the day after the election.
Well, I
was still curled up in a ball.
Able to function. I was well into a bottle of Jameson that night.
Yeah.
I woke up the next morning at like 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning with a hangover going, oh my God, what has my country done? I said, and I had already taken the day off because I was like, I thought I was going to be celebrating. Well, I ended up going fishing. And as I was sitting on the ferry to go to my flounder fishing spot, I took this page, that is like basically a troll page that I had created, and I just, right there on the ferry, hopped on my phone and renamed it, Donald Trump is Not My President. It was approved within 5 minutes. I uploaded some memes and shared them out across various pages that I own. And it absolutely exploded. Mm-hmm. Where it was adding, at one point, for about a 3 or 4 week period, it was adding 1,000 or 2,000 people a day. within a week, there were 2 or 3 pages with the exact same name that had been created. And then Palmer had also created a page, or a group rather, with the same name. I had managed to sneak into that group briefly before I got booted out. But, but I had fun while I was in there.
Okay, so last question for you, kind of for a fun one, is what is the most infamous fake news story that sticks out to you?
Ooh, goodness. There's been so many of the last couple of years. Humble brag, but my Colonel Sanders one I'm pretty fond of. But that's satire.
I don't consider that fake news.
Yeah.
Okay,
It was hilarious, though.
Yeah.
Good job.
I had a good time with it. Honestly, it wasn't even so much a fake news story necessarily as it was the documents that the Russians slipped to the FBI to create it as a new story about Hillary Clinton's email. And it tricked James Comey into coming out and saying something that flipped the election. As far as I'm concerned, that did flip the election. And the Russians are notorious for running fake news and misinformation campaigns. They've been doing it for years. Under Putin, like we thought, like, and I'm still old enough. I'm old enough to remember the days of the last days of communism and Russian propaganda. And under Putin, they took the KGB, propaganda machine and cranked it up.
Crazy stuff. It's crazy that we're talking about it, and it's based in fact.
Yeah, and it's not just our problem. They do it all over the world.
So true. Manny, we have really enjoyed talking with you today and hearing your view on fake news.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, it was my pleasure, and definitely enjoyed doing this. I always love doing an interview, and for people to put up with what I have to say, all the better.
Nice. Well, you were a great first guest, and we just can't thank you enough. So you're welcome back anytime.
Hey, we will definitely do this again.
All right. Have a good one, Manny.
Thanks, Manny.
All
Bye.
right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
So, to recap really quick, Louise Mensch,
No.
Bill Palmer,
No.
Claude Taylor,
No.
John Schindler.
Who is that?
Oh, that's like the only guy who knows anything about Russia.
Oh, definitely no.
Sites that reuse other people's work without giving them credit.
That's a no. And yes, just so you guys know, we did look up Modern Liberals.
Yes.
And they don't have any articles listed on Snopes. They are rated at mediabiasfactcheck.com as having a left bias.
Yeah, that's pretty
obvious.
Yep.
Yeah, they mentioned that the satire is well labeled, which I absolutely agree with. And they do question the list of fake news sites that Manny made, as they state that some of the sites don't put out all fake news, which is why I asked him about his criteria for the sites on the list. And I think he has a really good point about the sites using other people's work without giving them credit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was a lesson that I learned from talking with Manny. Thinking about plagiarism as fake news isn't something that an average person would necessarily think about or look for. But it's important because everyone, from a journalist working for a major publication to a political blogger stating their own personal opinion in their free time, deserves to be given credit for their original work and not have it ripped off to generate clicks.
Absolutely. Well, this was really fun, and we hope that you guys listening liked it as much as we did.
And if you did, follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Podcast Fake News. Subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts.
And hey, maybe give us a 5-star rating so more people can find us.
Yeah. Also, Beth, did you know that the Vox article that we received today was sent to us from a listener?
Thank you, Nick. Send us your articles, fake or about fake news, and who knows, maybe your article will help shape an episode too.
You can email us at podcastfakenews@gmail.com.
And we'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then,
spread jam,
not lies.